All right, welcome everyone to the October 7th Arborist call. The agenda today, we have a standard format, kind of a welcome and intro. We cover research and implementation updates on ZD and Zcash D. Sometimes, we don't have anything particular to share there, so we skip it, but we always hold that slot for updates. And then we have kind of an open discussion section with topics that people have suggested or things that people might want to discuss. A recurring topic that we talk about every Arborist call right now is NU5, kind of an overall status, where we're at, the timeline we're looking at, and then we just kind of have a wrap up for anything that's left. Usually with meeting every couple of weeks, we have a little bit extra time in the discussion section, so it's kind of free form. We can use the time however we'd like and discuss whatever's on anyone's mind. Arborist calls, just a level set for the folks that might be joining for the first time or watching this video back at some point. These are biweekly calls where people interested in protocol development get together to talk about upgrade timelines, features, R&D efforts, design, implementation, blockers, etc. So all things protocol. The purpose is to make it more accessible to a wider set of participants and provide transparency into how we're doing along the lines of protocol development. Anyone can participate. So if you're interested at all in protocol development, you can just register and join. If there's something you'd like to present or an in-depth item you'd like discussed by the group, you can just send that to me. It's Steven@electriccoin.co. We also have I should start putting the Zcash R&D Discord link in here too. We have a Zcash R&D Discord, and where the development community hangs out, and we have a call planning channel in there that you can just drop ideas into as well if you prefer that. So yeah, that's it. So first up, ZD on status updates. I can stop sharing if something you'd like. Yeah, okay. So I'll stop my share for a moment. Okay, go ahead, Deirdre, or whomever.
Yeah, for moi. Cool. So testnet activated for NU5 on my Wednesday morning. Yes, and this was the first network upgrade activation where Zebra was ready ahead of time, and we had a bunch of Zebras ready to go, and they ran, and the activation actually happened while they were syncing and validating chain, and everything went fine, and this continues to go. So the latest release, our latest alpha release, is alpha release 18 that is available for use, and included all that stuff, including a lot of the dependency updates and any changes we needed to make so that we could pull in some Orchard Crate stuff, some Halo 2 stuff, some script stuff. Thank you to Strad for helping us with linker issues, because we are still using a wrapped version of the C++ Zcash script under the hood, because we initially tried to write it all from scratch in Rust, and that was a large project. And so we said, we'll try and do that later. We need to get the scripts working. So it's still compiling some of that stuff under the hood. Thank you very much for helping us to get that working. A whole bunch of that stuff, librust, Zcash libraries, primitives, history, incremental Merkle tree. We pulled all those in so that we could talk to the network on testnet for NU5. We could be on the correct branch height. We could validate all the sig hashes. We could validate all those scripts, all of that stuff, and continue to operate when we switched over from the activation height to the new activation height, and everything worked. So to be clear, we're validating most, but not all, of the NU5 consensus rules right now, but those will be finished up after we have like another week's worth-ish of mempool work to finish. We're finishing that up, and then we're finishing up the rest of those NU5 rules. And then we should be caught up within the next few weeks, but currently the latest release is not validating everything in NU5, but will be soon. I see a hand. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I was curious if you tested the case where a node started syncing before activation and was still syncing during activation, just because
Yeah,
Yeah.
we made sure that we had some up, thankfully. I think I had one up overnight, and then I was streaming too much tracing output in my console, filled up all of my swap memory and made my computer crash. But that was because I had unlimited back scroll on my terminal emulator, and it was very sad. And if you don't do that, it works fine. I think some of the other Zcash Foundation people had theirs running, and we had a couple of, I think we had a cloud instance running. Started before the activation and was syncing through the activation and kept on syncing. Tior, do you have anything to say on that?
Oh, I have clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was curious if any of the nodes weren't yet caught up to the tip of the network before activation. Just because that seems like a case where Zcash D has had some issues.
So both of my instances were not caught up on testnet, and then I activated them after, or at least one of them I activated after NU5 activated on testnet, and it synced through fine. So is that
cool?
Close?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's close.
And I just want to make sure I can see people just in case anything. Okay. So that's most of Zebra's update. Some of the other things are mempool stuff. A lot of internals about making sure that we're getting closer to parity with the ZIP 401 anti-DOS rules. Making sure that we're removing expired transactions, making sure that we reject things that have conflicting spends, a lot of the stateful stuff. And then, of course, when we do a network upgrade, we just blow away the entire mempool and make sure that we don't keep any of those things lagging around. We have a change we need to make where we will still be talking to peers if nothing goes wrong through a network upgrade, even if they are on, we negotiated on the older version of the protocol, of the network protocol, until something bad happens. We need to make sure that we actively close those connections as opposed to making sure that we do it kind of halvesies at the moment. We need to do it all the way. And I think we have a bug for that, or a change to do that soon. Yeah, that is the big stuff. Mempool, making sure we were ready for NU5, and we were, and continuing to do that. Oh, and of course, we made a small change to our implementation of Synsomia when we're computing note commitments, or when we're computing Synsomia commitments. To comport with the changes to the spec that came out of the changes to the orchard circuit and all of that stuff that happened the week before. That was a small change to go from using incomplete addition to complete addition formulas, and that's in our thing. We are not using that, since we don't have a wallet yet, we're not using it to actually compute any commitments and putting them on chain, but that is to be used when we do our wallet work for Zebra Client starting late this year and going into next year. Okay, and does anyone have any questions? Yay!
All right, thank you. I'm going to screen back up. Always have trouble sharing after I unshare for some reason. I think it's just because there's so many choices at the bottom of the screen or something. Okay, so let me go back to presentation mode, step forward. So the big update for Zcash D, of course, is NU5 support related items, if you will. So just move forward and talk about that. Next big thing is NU5 is active on testnet. So pretty major milestone right there. It activated, yeah, depending on where you're at in the world, either late on the 5th or early on the 6th. But like a lot of things on testnet, it was accelerated from when we picked the height. If you did the math on the blocks, it's one day, and then it winds up being, oh, I don't know, almost 24 hours earlier within the course of a week or so. But that's testnet, and that's fine. So we're okay with that. Kind of a release update in support of, and I'm actually going to hop out of presentation mode here for a moment because it'll be easier to show a few things. In support of NU5, we put out a few things. Release 450, which is what's at the initial testnet activation height and contained all the, the deployment of the, NU5 zips. So kind of the full feature release. It's got all the NU5 consensus work in it. Orchard, of course, version 5 transaction format support, etc. Transaction non-malleability. We put that out on the 23rd, I believe, September 23rd. On September 29th, we released 4.5.1, which we have a blog post out there about that as well. It contained a couple of things, and I'll kind of kick the ball over to Strad or whomever on the call wants to kind of chat about these, but there was a couple of testnet Orchard circuit changes we put in. And then there was kind of a regression in the get balance RPC method, but we'll first talk about the circuit updates that we made.
Sure. So yeah, just after we, as always, just after we'd cut the release, that's when you find your best bugs.
Right.
We identified 2 bugs in the Orchard circuit that we had just put out into testnet. One of them was that the diversifier base, so if you're familiar with the sapling key structure, the way we do diversified addresses is we have this diversifier value from which we generate a point, and then we take the incoming viewing key and we multiply them together to get this another point PKD that's used in the address. And the diversifier and the PKD together form your address. The problem basically here is that if that diversifier base is allowed to be the identity, I think of it as a 0, then you can multiply any IVK by it and get the same address, i.e. the identity. Or there's a few more details about specifically how the circuit's implemented. So that base needs to be not the identity. And in the code outside the circuit, it was correctly enforcing that. But we discovered just after we pushed the release that the circuit code itself was not enforcing that. And the circuit code's what needs to enforce that because it's a private input to the circuit. The verify nodes don't ever learn it. So we had to make that change because otherwise it would be a potential like double spending problem. We didn't go all the way through working out exactly how you'd use it, but we're pretty confident that it could have been used that way. So we wanted to fix it immediately. And then the other one we noticed then was a thing inside Sensimia where the definition of Sensimia hashing uses incomplete addition for performance, and we have a proof that that's perfectly fine to do. However, then we were using Sensimia hash in a commitment scheme, effectively as a partisan commitment, and that was also using incomplete addition when it actually needed to use complete addition because it needed to handle an exceptional case, namely when the blinding value happened to be 0, which it can be for because you need to sample the blinding randomness uniformly in order to get a uniformly random output. So that one was a bit less confident that you could exploit it, but it was something that needed addressing really to ensure that we retained the correct privacy properties that we were expecting from node commitments in particular. So we deployed a new circuit change that alters those, and because that amounts to a consensus rule change, the consensus branch ID updated, and so we updated several other parameters about the consensus as well. Like we've done for several network upgrades in the past. The consensus branch ID is the domain separator we use for consensus rules. So that's the thing that provides, for example, bilateral replay protection, two-way replay protection for wallets. So it's important that that value gets re-rolled, re-randomized whenever we make a change to the rules that a deployed node would think to understand as the consensus rules. So that's why that changed. Obviously, the activation height bumped back. We bumped a couple other things. But yeah, so that's that. I would not be surprised if there ends up being another consensus change, if for no other reason than cleaning up parts of the circuit to make them easy, simpler and more stable if we need to. So expect that we might re-roll the consensus branch and things again before we hit mainnet as part of this testing process.
Deirdre, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah, thanks. I know the Kedit audit came in, and then this issue was found. Are Kedit going to be asked to re-review this change or any other, like kind of you mentioned, maybe shaking out some cleanup in the circuit? Are they, if that occurs as well, are they going to be asked to look at those changes? Is that kind of within their brief, or is that extra work?
I can answer the latter. I think the answer is kind of depends on what we find. If it's trivial, if everyone collectively believes, oh, this is very trivial, or if it's something we feel like needs to be reevaluated, then we would engage Kedit again to take a look at it. Yeah.
I mean, some of the cleanups I was referring to there are things like, things that appear in the audit results that are like, this could be simpler or this could whatever.
Oh, cool.
But so like it's effectively like addressing audit comments that we could choose to not address. Like we already addressed one of the comments, for instance, that before we cut 450, there was one big simplification that we did to make a bit of one part of the circuit easier to understand and review. But there might be others. And the thing is, some of those simplifications could just be to the code to make it clear without changing the circuit. But as with many things in the circuit, like even just like switching, 1 minus B to B minus 1 or whatever to be consistent throughout the circuit changes your parameters. So so there can be things of that variety that would just be essentially, addressing things that were in the audit and therefore would sort of be within the remit of that one. But yeah, there could be other things that come up that might be separate.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
And then, the other change here was just, there was a bug we found in get balance that we fixed in this release, which was due to, in 450, we backported a change from upstream Bitcoin Core that removed all the account logic, which we've had essentially disabled from Zcash launch for like 5 years. But they had finally removed all those RPCs from their code base. And so we just backported that to get rid of it as well, because we didn't want the word account to be in a bunch of RPCs when we're about to introduce unified address accounts, which would just get really confusing. But in doing so, upstream removed 2 separate, independent and slightly different balance calculations and replaced it with a third one. And the third one just did things very slightly differently and exposed a bug that's existed since before Zcash launched, which was causing it to undercount balance in certain situations. So we found and fixed that in 451.
All right. Questions about any of that? Let's see before we move on. Okay, so back to the presentation. And then we are working on yet another release, 451-1. And we are adding, it should say, adding a new RPC called list addresses with functionality that replaces and subsumes the get addresses by account RPC, which was the account related RPCs were deprecated and then were removed in 450. It turns out Zec Wallet Lite was using that RPC.
Zec Wallet full node, I think.
Sorry, Zec Wallet full node, not Zec Wallet Lite, correct? Yes, the full node version was using that. So list addresses, we've collaborated with Aditya there on that. And the new RPC should meet his needs on that project. And then we also, 451-1 includes a fix to mark V5 transaction format as standard for NU5. It's kind of a mouthful. Strad, you want to give us the basics on that one as well?
Yeah, upstream Bitcoin core that we inherit in Zcash D has both consensus rules. It has a distinction between consensus rules and standard rules. And the consensus rules are everything the protocol is allowed to do. And then the standard rules are the things that most nodes would prefer you to do. So for instance, it includes things like only allowing certain known formats for script pub key, script codes, certain kinds of, like something that looks like P2SH or something that looks like P2PKH scripts. Stuff like that is part of the standard rules. So technically, the blocks can contain any kind of script commitment, but in practice, the individual Zcash nodes will reject things they don't recognize as standard. You can bypass that by talking directly to a miner and getting the miner to include your block, which is that's sort of how the design's meant to work. They also had standard rules around like a limited range of what versions were allowed. They allowed any positive version number, but restricted to a couple of standard ones. In the upgrades we've done since, where we added new versions, we've maintained sort of that distinction where we have the range of versions that are allowed on the network at all, and then the standard range that Zcashd will allow in the mempool. And until recently, those have always been size 1. Like there's only been v3 allowed or only been v4 allowed. But for NU5, we're allowing v5 transactions in addition to v4. And this was just an oversight in v450, where we forgot to expand the Zcashd's standard rules to include v5. So v4 transaction, all transaction versions could be mined, but v5 specifically wasn't propagating through the mempool. So this hotfix will just alter the standard rules for Zcashd nodes to allow v5 transactions into their mempools to propagate.
All right. Thank you, Strad. Okay. I think we have all questions on that. There's something in, let's see, question. Okay. Got that one. All right. Moving forward. Feature set, again, for sake of completeness in terms of zips that were updated, and then of course net new zips within U5. Same list as we've had up for a few meetings. The NU5 timeline, the only adjustment from the last Arborist call is because of 451. The testnet support release is technically the September 29th release with activation of NU5 on testnet. Again, depending on where you were, late on the 5th or early on the 6th. And then we're targeting, mainnet support release 500 would be, we don't have a set date for it, but roughly mid-November at some point in there, depending on how our continued testing goes on testnet. All right. Any questions, comments, or anything there? All right, I'm going to get out of my screen share. And then we'll kind of just, get that off the screen so I can see everyone again. Okay, so any questions on any of the updates from ZBRD or Zcashd in U5 that anyone has, anything they want to discuss related to that? We have some time left available. We can open it up and discuss anything anyone would like. Deirdre.
Do we get to see the Kedit audit report anytime soon?
I mean, I think so. It's we gave them feedback on the Orchard, one of the testnet circuit changes. We gave them that feedback. So we have a final version of the NCC report that we've given a thumbs up to. So we'll kind of coordinate, the release of that publicly. And then because Kedit finished their audit a little bit after that, they've got the draft. We've given them some tweaks, typos and things like that. And then this last update. So don't have a definitive. I would expect sometime in the next couple of weeks, we would probably have what they considered their final review one more time.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Coordinate getting those published. So. All right. Any other questions? Okay, no questions. Any other topics anyone wants to discuss?
There was a queue in the Q&A, and I accidentally clicked it away, but I answered it in text. But
Okay.
for that person, they were asking are there docs for Zebra RPC, and I dropped a link to our Zebra docs. Currently, we do not have RPC methods like Zcash Ds. What we have are a bunch of metrics exposed as OpenTelemetry or Prometheus metrics. A lot of tracing, if you are familiar with instrumentation like Jaeger, to look at the tracing of what is running inside Zebra. And we have a ton of logging that you can configure and filter in standard out. This is because basically it's been a developer-centric project for a long time. But for the RPC methods that we will be adding, we're going to be adding several between now and probably test mainnet activation in January, mostly so that we can try to do wallet integration so that we could slot in as a backend for either like Zec Wallet full node or Light Wallet D or something like that. We will have some RPC methods in the next few months. We probably will not have anywhere near as many various methods that Zcash D supports, but we will have some in the future, but we don't have them right now. But you can get a lot of information out of Zebra as it's running. It's just hard to query it for specifics.
Definitely worth being selective in what you choose to bring over.
Yeah.
Yes, rather than having a large pool of things that have certain semantics that you then get to inherit.
Right.
And I'll drop that link to those docs again in the big chat.
Cool. Very good. Yeah, Chris didn't have enough thumbs on that one, like double thumbs up. Yeah. Cannot more strongly support. I'm surprised he didn't run and grab like poster board and put like 100% or something.
Yeah. Like I'd be very happy because like obviously if you're adding those kinds of RPCs, you'll be, that's sort of the Bitcoin's flavor of JSON RPC, which is like JSON RPC 1.0 plus some custom error handling, which is bespoke. If there were a preferred alternative potentially, that might be interesting to have some discussions on. Having some shared new RPCs or interfaces in that fashion.
So one thing that we're trying to like design out and plan out is, one, we have to support JSON serialization and querying to slot into where usually a Zcash D would live. But there may be other things, especially when we start on Zebra client, that are completely their own thing. So we're trying to figure out if we want to do gRPC, do we want protobufs, what kind of serialization, and do we want a binary kind of data type instead of a JSON-based data type, and for what specific things we would want that for. So there may be a point in time where Zebra supports some JSON stuff and some gRPC or whatever stuff. So we can definitely talk about that and say like, we're thinking about doing these for these and these for this, and maybe both for some stuff for reasons, but it's definitely still up in the air.
Yeah, we're likely to end up having a similar conversation when we're looking at how we integrate a newer Rust-based wallet into Zcash D, because it would be nice if we could keep it decoupled from the main binary.
Yeah.
So we'll have similar API discussions to have.
Right. All right.
James in chat has the right oxidation idea.
Yes. Yeah, it's a couple of questions from the chat. I was just kind of scrolling back through that to make sure we didn't miss anything. There's a couple of questions on, when would programmability be coming to Zcash? The answer is that, just speaking from ECC side, we don't have a definitive of, we're targeting that for NU, whatever it might be at this point. Definitely from our side, like taking, product and market input and, indicators that people would be supportive of that, and that's something that's kind of high on the priority list. I know that there's folks at the foundation that are equally interested in programmability at the right time, kind of in the right sequence. So it's not a definitive answer for you, like when is it coming, but it is on the, kind of, the big roadmap, meaning things that I believe most folks would agree are important for Zcash. And then there's also a question in Q&A: when are stable coins coming to Zcash? And again, the general answer is, big roadmap item, when would stable coins come? We don't have anything slotted for an NU. If you're talking about stable coins like USDC, for example, issued by Circle, then that would be, obviously we have to recruit a partner that would do the issuance directly. It's part of some of the work we're doing and product research we're doing around ZSAs. We're talking to some issuers, and some of those issuers are stablecoin vendors. So hopefully we'll have some pretty good data. Where our goal is to kind of wrap up both the economic research we're doing around ZSAs and the product research in the month of October. That's our target. It depends on how much we have to scramble between now and the end of October, of course, but that's kind of what we're looking to do.
Yeah, it'd be nice to maybe like restart some of the discussions we had about like how we'd get programmability in. Because we've had a variety of ideas over the years, like as far back as like pay to verification key and some earlier things like that. There's obviously the Zexy work doing similar kind of programmability things there. It'd be nice to sort of start sort of figuring out what, given what's been learned in the ecosystem over the last sort of 5 years, what approaches now seem reasonable and what flexibility they give us. Because I don't think Zcash is ever going to support the kind of flexibility you get in Ethereum, but we don't necessarily need to. What matters is, like, what matters to me at least, so I'm not speaking for ECC here, but what matters to me is being able to define the set of things, the set of functionality that gives the best utility for programmability while retaining the privacy benefits of Zcash. And so that puts restrictions on what you can do. But I don't think fuzzily, there's actually too many restrictions that would really inhibit like a majority of what goes on in the programmability space. It'd be worth like, setting up some discussions at some point to, once we're finished with the NU5 gauntlet to
I'm really interested in looking at the snaps model used by Mina in more detail. I don't know how that handles privacy. It's gonna be tricky.
Because they're an interesting model where they started with snarks for scalability but not privacy, and are sort of trying to bring in privacy on top of that, whereas we're going in the opposite direction.
The slightly inhibited, I think, because they use an account model. So it's more difficult to do privacy in that model.
Right. Yeah, but it's also more difficult to do programmability in the UTXO model.
Right.
Because essentially everything has to be built around the capabilities that exist on the chain, and your execution throughput is limited in part by the rate at which you can alter your pre-commitments.
That's true.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. And carrying on, anything on from the chat? Anything on Ledger hardware wallet support? I answered something similar on Twitter the other day. On the Ledger side, Juan Lenny and Zondax, which is the company he's associated with, have a grant from the Zcash Foundation to deliver certain phases of that work. We did some minimal code review of that code base, suggested a couple of performance, like, low-hanging fruit. Like, it wasn't an exhaustive audit or anything, but low-hanging fruit on performance improvements. Got that back to them. If I understand correctly, and if anyone has any more updated information, just chime in. The next or the last leg in the delivery of that is some form of wallet support, either through like Ledger Live, which if I understand from Juan, that that's a pretty high bar of review, and they also make the decision based on, I guess, some kind of market requirements, but definitely don't have the inside track there. But also Juan was looking at leveraging Zec Wallet to be the wallet side of that. So I'm not exactly sure where those conversations are, but I do know that's kind of what that last step is, I believe. So anyone have anything to add on that or an update to that in any way?
Yeah, I think the I think that Ledger require that that there's a working wallet before they'll consider integrating it into Ledger Live. So it's a matter of finding the cycles to be able to, finding someone with the cycles to be able to help with that integration. And I think that Han who created Z Wallet was looking at that, but he there's an open issue, I think, on the Zondax side. So it's there is it's slow progress at the moment because it's just that people are busy with other things.
Right.
Yeah. But it is on the card.
Yeah, I think there's someone who there's some group that applied for a grant for doing like a MetaMask style wallet through ZMG, wasn't there?
It was Missed FPGA.
I think, yeah. So that might eventuate something that could be a locus.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also the so there's the Trezor ZOMG grant which is going on as well. We've been having talks with them because they're looking at our code stacks and seeing what pieces they can reuse. And so I've had some conversations with their developer around like making various parts of the pasta curves no standard and stuff like that. So we're making progress on the fundamentals on that side as well.
Do they need everything to be no standard?
Well, yeah, because they're operating in an allocation-free environment.
Okay.
So yeah,
okay.
that's the motivation. Like, yeah, I did ask if they could just do without IO, and they're like, no. Sadly, they also like they have 64 kilobytes of memory, so you'd think we could do all right with that. And then we're like, okay, and our square root table is 37 kilobytes.
Oh,
whatever. They're like, yeah, let's not do that. So. But it's okay.
I mean, I have written embedded applications in 64K of memory, and you can use allocation as long as you pre-allocate it. It doesn't.
The Trezor model is not built around an allocator, so
you don't have to put everything on the stack. Is the point? You can still use you could still implement standard Rust in that amount of memory. I'm sure you could.
Yeah, but that's not what they're choosing to do. So and most of our stuff isn't too far away from it. So for example, the F4 Jumble implementation that did require a bit of massaging, but they did that, and there's a PR open which we've done some review on the we factored out an F4 Jumble crate out of the Zcash address crate, because they're not going to use Zcash address because that one is built around allocations, and its UX, like the user experience of the Zcash address crate, is built around simplicity, and like we handle all the pieces for you. In particular, the unified address parts of it, it's our unified address type is a wrapper around a VEC of receivers, which requires allocations, and altering the API to not require that would significantly impair the UX. But they said like they don't need to support arbitrary thousands of receivers. They only need to support like 3. So they're just going to do that piece themselves. But reusing the components inside it, we can break those out and make it usable.
Was there any other components than F4 Jumble? Because I know we've already broken out.
So pasta curves as well. There's a PR over there to make that most standard. And there will be more pieces. Like they'd asked about the Orchard crate, and again, we'll see what pieces, because we haven't designed it to be no standard, and there'll be pieces that we can make no standard, not too hard, like wall off things behind a feature flag. But
yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, is like, is it possible to keep some of the traits and stuff like that the same, and just like under the hood you just have a feature flag that's like, no, you're going to use the no standard like almost entirely on the stack multiplications and stuff?
Yeah, that part's easy to do. The problem is more anything where we have like, a bundle is a list of actions, and that is a variable length field. So it's things like that are sort of fundamental to the UX. That we have to decide how to, like an action itself.
That's an Orchard as opposed to the pasta
exactly.
curves. The pasta curves is in easy mode.
Yeah, pasta curves is much easier. But stuff like an Orchard action, the action type can be no standard pretty easily, because it's all fixed length fields, but the bundle type probably can't. So it's pieces like that we need to tease apart and figure out.
Is there a way to like do an optional restrictive mode for this sort of stuff, to be like, yes, in theory, a bundle can be n actions as long as they fit in a transaction, but like in restricted mode, it is maximum of blah, so that Tezor can be like, yes, we support, I don't know, that doesn't seem.
It feels a bit weird for Rust feature flags, which are supposed to be additive. And it feels weird that you would enable a feature flag that would alter the internal behavior of a bundle.
Yeah.
It feels like it'd be better to have a separate type. Like we end up having to do that anyway in some cases. For example, like in the FFcrat, we have batch inversion APIs, and the non-allocating ones, you're required to pass in something that can provide scratch space. So it fundamentally has to be a different API than when you can allocate. So. Yeah, do our best here, but there's we've got the motivation to enable to enable them to reuse as much as possible, because then they get to spend their times on the doing the bits that we don't want to do. We don't have the time to do or the expertise.
Right. Okay, a few of the questions that came in. One, what happened to the Cosmos and Polkadot bridge in Zcash? Is there any new information? I'm assuming on the Cosmos side, that means this referring to the Cosmos peg zone work that was started sometime back. And I'm not familiar with anything recent on anything with Polkadot, unless there was a bridge project that I wasn't aware of. Maybe there was some talk at some point about doing it, but I don't know of anything that started on it. Cosmos peg zone, anything from Foundation on that? I know that was a project Henry was working on.
Henry and a little bit of George, I think, were working on it at the time. And when Henry left, that was like, we were a skeleton crew and we were trying to keep working on Zebra. So it was basically prioritization of what we were working on. And it was basically Zebra, a little bit of Frost, and keeping up our DNS seeders and stuff like that. So it's basically shelved, for indefinitely.
Right. Okay.
No current plans to resurrect that right now.
Right. Okay. Let's see what else. Oh, this question about the holdup in Ledger, is that a sub time or money issue? If it's money, could it be funded by ZOMGZF? Again, I was in a few of the conversations early on when we were talking about it, just kind of help Juan and Don Dax and the Ledger folks just answer some basic questions. I think it's more of a resourcing and market research issue on the Ledger side. Like I'm not aware of them saying, oh, if you can join a certain program, we can get you in Ledger Live or something like that would require any expenditure at all to be supported there. Now that, again, my knowledge of that is pretty limited, but I haven't seen any of that come up in any conversation. So I think it's more kind of an issue of, resources on the Ledger side to do the reviews and the audits of what needs to go into Ledger Live to support a new technology like Zcash Shielded. So.
It also getting the integration between what Zondex have created and a working wallet.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some sort of web style wallet, because I think I think the Ledger Live is built around Electron, if I recall correctly.
I think you are right.
So that's probably what the main blocker is having a JavaScript or JavaScript compatible wallet, which does not currently exist for Zcash shielded stuff. It'd be something that'd be nice to get to, and like we had goals to enable that with the Rust pieces. Certainly, like back when we first did the Rust wallet stuff in 2019 for the mobile SDKs, Rust to via WASM to JavaScript was still relatively early, I think, and in particular, you could not get the performance at all. Whereas nowadays, you actually have tools like, if you're using, say, Rayon for parallelization, there's a nice crate. I haven't played with it, but I'm excited by it for hooking up the Rayon thread pool to web workers, so that you can actually get the same kind of parallelization performance as you would sort of natively with Rust. And that's the kind of thing that without that, a web wallet would not really be performant or practical. So now that that's a thing, it's more feasible to potentially package it in that way.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. Another question that came in was on, the original question was, have you thought about blockchain social responsibility? And I kind of asked a clarifying question to see that might mean different things to different folks, but it's essentially a blockchain creates programs that supports, a variety of, great initiatives, vulnerable communities through crypto, for example, sending kids to school, cancer patients, building homes for the homeless, et cetera, those kind of things. So first of all, I think excellent question and excellent thought. One of the things so I think there's plenty of opportunity for that, and especially in terms of looking at public goods in general, surround the things that we're doing in crypto. On the ECC side, we started a program called Crypto in Context. Started in I'm going to get this wrong, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. Started in New York, one of the boroughs in New York. I can't remember if it's the Bronx or Brooklyn. I think it was Bronx. I'm not positive. But that was
it was the Bronx, yeah.
Bronx. Okay, right. Okay, so I was right about that part. But that was really targeted at I believe school children and people, to educate them on the basics of crypto, like how can you get involved with the project and things of that nature. So I think there's a great opportunity to give back in a number of cases. I don't know if anyone else, Dodger, Zuko, Nate, anyone else would like to chime in with any kind of thoughts on that. Feel free to hop in. All right. And then another question in news about Wren Bridge and Zebra compatibility, aka technique to go from shielded Zec to ETH and back. So I see Deirdre's typing an answer for that.
Not familiar with Wren Bridge. We do not have anything on the Zebra roadmap about bridging at all in the next, in anything that's on our roadmap. And our roadmap does not go very far into the future, but it goes somewhat into the future.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Nate, your hand about this question.
Oh yeah, specifically Wren Bridge. If you're not familiar, the cool thing about it from the Zcash protocol side is it just appears as an address that's controlled by WrenVM. So WrenVM is striving to be some decentralized network, but its interface from the Zcash side is just an address.
Mm-hmm.
So that means any wallet that can send to a T-adder or receive from a T-adder can interact with it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no protocol changes needed. And since Zebra doesn't have a wallet yet, it doesn't interact yet. But once it does have a wallet, it will interact. So
totally,
that's
we just run a Zebra node, a Zebra D node.
Yeah.
So
I would not be surprised if Wren aren't even using Zcash D directly. They're probably using Zcash D to get network data, but it would not surprise me if they're using their own code stack that for Bitcoin, but modified to for the Zcash parameters.
Yeah, it's written in Go. It's like a light wallet client.
Oh,
yeah.
They could use Zebra Network, and they could
Yeah.
they could cut out a whole bunch of stuff.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. Got that one. Let's see. Oh, Nate had a good point when we were talking about Cosmos. Almost started to say that, but is the possibility that so what a peg zone is, if I understand correctly, to be able to implement the IBC protocol, there are certain requirements of the zone, which would be kind of an additional chain, and one of those things has to do with finality. And a Nakamoto-based consensus of proof of work, which is based on probabilistic finality, doesn't really work in the IBC world. So what a peg zone is a layer between the other chain, like a Zcash, like a zone chain, and the hub, and that peg zone is targeted at assuring a degree of finality that's acceptable in the IBC world at a high level, as I understand it. So an alternative to doing, like the Cosmos peg zone work would be like, and again, qualification, not on a specific roadmap or anything. Obviously, we've talked about proof of stake at some level. If the proof of stake protocol you implemented would most likely meet those finality requirements, and then you could implement an IBC layer on top of that, which then negates the need for the peg zone type work in the first place. So Nate, your hand's up.
Oh yeah, I just realized sorry, I'm hopping back to the question about the RIN bridge, because it says in parentheses, aka a technique to go from shielded ZEC to ETH and back. So I wanted to comment on that specifically. So RIN bridge works with a T address. So if you use their website or wallet, or there's some front end, and you say, I want to transfer from ZEC to RINZEC on Ethereum, and it just tells you, okay, send your ZEC to this address. If you send to that address from a shielded address, then that works. So it works just out of the box with like ZEC Wallet mobile, for example. And likewise, if you're transferring RINZEC from Ethereum back, I don't think they can send to a shielded address. So it's kind of similar to withdrawing from an exchange that doesn't support withdrawing to shielded. So if you're using a wallet like ZEC Wallet, you can receive on a T address, and then it's super easy to just shield it immediately thereafter. And if that's basically as good as you can get for privacy for RINZEC, because if you think about it, if they supported a Z address directly, they still need to issue the RINZEC over on Ethereum. So when they do that, people could see the amount and could figure out which Zcash transaction probably was doing that. So you get very similar privacy anyway with the current thing, and it already works with ZEC Wallet. So I hope that extra context was helpful.
All right, let's see. Oh, another question came in here. Oh, okay. I think we answered that one. Very good. All right, I think we're kind of caught up in the chat as well. Okay, anyone have anything else? No? Okay, well then we will wrap up a few minutes early. So everyone have a good rest of the day wherever you are, and a good upcoming weekend. And we will catch up please join us in the Discord R&D. There's some great conversations in there too. So anyway, everyone have a good rest of the day and a good weekend. So
yeah, thanks.
all right, take
Cheers,
care.
thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye everyone.
Cheers.